So we are very clear about what you have to do, because this is, this has a lot of, it's nice color.
La 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 la. Not daga daga daga. Not too thick. We have two fours.
Thank you very much, and welcome also from my side. And I'm very proud to be here and grateful to collaborate with Ensemble Modern again, with these two important members. In this case, it's really something specific, because Rainer Römer worked with this piece so long times, including these students of the Ensemble Modern Academy. There is an interesting DVD, which is it's a documentation of not only the concert of the whole Ensemble Modern group, the real Ensemble Modern, but an alternative also with these students. I can really recommend this this evident and extremely interesting DVD. You can compare both versions. And in our 1 hour we have here together, we can ask about this. How to work with students in a piece like that, and a very specific piece like that, which integrates elements of improvisation, which integrates elements of the own personality, I would like to say. And within this documentation, you have also the possibility to hear what's going on in the time. That's one part also of our first hour, as you mentioned before. Another aspect is the question of intercultural discussion. There are some controversial points, one could say, and at least we could ask if this piece is very typical for the time of the 70s, or it's a very fresh piece. And how to do with this piece, how to change some perspectives working today here in Oslo with students, and which are elements which are really changed since the world premiere more than 40 years ago. It was a big honor for you to work with the composer, Römer and Ueli, but it was really a pity during the process of performing, Mauricio Kagel died. Yeah? Not really?
He died later on. We have played it quite often with him.
Ah, okay, I didn't.
We have worked with him for 10 years on that piece, and then later on he died off.
You could describe a bit the elements of collaboration with Kagel, concentrated on one point. Did he say to you, please don't repeat the world premiere lots of years ago, please make it in the other way?
I guess no, we don't need a microphone, no, I think everyone can be heard.
For her, sorry.
For you?
Yeah,
oh, for the tape, I'm sorry. Yes, I guess maybe Rainer has heard that recording. None of us others has any reference to that first recording. I think that's not the issue with this kind of open piece. It's a collage piece where there's certain parameters of the score are prescribed, which are done in a score usual way, but there is parts of it which are absolutely graphic, in a graphic notation, and those are absolutely free, and you're free to use part of it or the entity of it, or combine several parts of various things. So as the whole thing at the end results then is always new. So that's why what you say about the version of the Academy and our version, which we've done with Mauro, yes, okay, but the piece always will have a different imprint, not only depending on the players, but also depending on the instrumentarium you get, depending on where you are. If you perform that piece in Asia, or if you perform it in Africa, of course, exotic means something different there. So you might come across quite a lot of European music there, so which is there exotic to their ears. So that's the idea, actually, of the starting point of the creation of Mauricio Kagel's. Is exotic means something of your cultural circles. And so, of course, that's why the piece always will have a different outprint.
Do you have a different opinion, or this?
No, same thing. I just wanted to, when you have the time frame, the first performance was done in 1972, and we met Kagel in Ensemble around 86, 87. We had a tour with him, and even 85, yeah. And then in 92, there was the opening of an art hall in Germany, and he said he wanted to do this piece with us, and he said he wanted to do Exotica, and for us it needed half a year to prepare what the piece is about, and then we played it. Yeah, that from 92 until 2008-9, we played many times. And the last time we met him, we were starting to produce this DVD, and we were in the rehearsal process with him, and it came to the point that in this, yeah, he was already ill, and he died, and so we couldn't bring him anymore on this DVD. So this piece has a long history by itself, and a long history also with Ensemble Modern.
Okay, if I'm right, I would like to say that there is indeed a big difference, a characteristic difference between this premiere, yeah, hopefully, and I would like to point it in a way that the grotesque elements, the banal elements, are reduced in your version. I don't know why, if it's the intention of the composer, or if it's the character of the ensemble, or my theory would be the time has changed. Yeah, you can't make a humor like that of the 70s on 1998. 1998 was the premiere. Yeah?
No, 90. For us,
for
our
first
92.
92, yes. And so, step by step, the handling with this piece was changed a bit. It would be interesting to make interpretation seminar concentrated on this question, but of course that's not our main topic here. The circumstances of Kagel, I think nearly everybody knows here that Kagel is a specialist of music on music, music about music. He wrote pieces about Beethoven and Schumann and Stravinsky and so on. And of course in this row you can reflect also Exotica. It's a reflection of exotic instruments, like he did before a reflection on old instrument. It's a music for Renaissance instruments and so. Yeah.
Just to mention, yes, of course, yes. He was a writer for music about music, but in the first rank, I think he was a theater writer.
Yeah.
He had yes,
instrumental.
He had the idea that music needs to have a kind of theatrical performance. So his stronghold was actually very strong, directly linked to the fact that interpretation is in demand, and interpretation is happening in the moment on stage. So that's, I guess, that's also one of his typical pieces. It's very difficult to define as a purely musical instrument. It comes very quickly to the fact that it's using all these instruments, using musicians, Western musicians who do use instruments which are not familiar with, it comes to that theatrical aspect. So I think his pieces always have a very strong theatrical outprint.
And what is interesting, Kagel also wrote pieces concentrated on this aspect of exotism. Yeah, some of his pieces are concentrated. One title I have to read: Ornithologica Multiplicata. You know this piece? It's a piece for exotic and regional birds. Yeah, of course it's ironic reflection on Olivier Messiaen, but this topic exotism is very specific for Mauricio Kagel. Of course, it's in a tradition of other pieces. let us mention at least Puccini's Turandot. Yeah, and there also this combination between exotism and grotesque elements is already done. But what I would like to point out in this short beginning period of our conversation is that there is probably also a relationship to other attempts of intercultural thinking in this time. Let us mention Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Telemusik of the 60s. There are also elements of different cultures, but there is a totally different situation. Stockhausen tries to combine these elements, but he tries to have harmony, to integrate it. And in the literature about this piece of Kagel, it's since long time the opinion, also Klüppelholz wrote that this Kagel piece is a direct reaction to Stockhausen. Yeah? It's an idea, of course, of the group of musicologists. For you as a performer, not so interesting at the moment when you are performing this piece. But for the history of this piece, it's really an important question. So you can ask whether at the point of preparation this piece, these ironic ideas were really important, and so you have a remark that these ironic elements are less important today because the historical situation has changed. There are so many composers combining elements of different cultures, hybrid cultures, and so it's something more usual than in this time. That was the explanation of my first attempt to explain the change of this piece. And for us, it's a remark to make something new. What is also interesting is, of course, the point you could talk about this, the combination between fixed elements and improvised elements. We should go a bit deeper in this field because, as Ueli already mentioned, there are different parts in this score from A, B, C, D, E. And each part has a totally different accent. Yeah? And to say the truth, there is a choice for the performers which part comes after after another part. And there is a big difference between fixed part A, we can show it here, and that's the beginning of the score. You could try to explain a bit deeper. And another part, which is part D, in which every person of this ensemble, 6 persons, has to show own personal activities, I would describe.
Definition of what he reads.
Yes.
There's also something written. There's an indication how you have to behave, what you do with your musical language. No, it's fine. She'll hear me. But it's cool. It's okay. But yes, it relies very much on the taste and on the personality of the proper player.
So it's you have to say it's really a group of soloists with own experience, own personalities, and the element D you can combine also with other elements, and you can make your own version. And Rainer Romer could describe what the way for the version for the students of Ensemble Modern Academy was.
Yeah, maybe I want to. Is it enough? Does it work here? Yeah. Just to understand a little bit what the score is about. The A part, Kagel says it should be played in its whole. It's a whole. It's 290 bars, and he says you can intercept it anywhere during this process and put in the other parts, which I will describe later. And but the A part is, for me, it's just composed music by Kagel, nothing more and nothing less. What you see here is Here he writes instrument. This instrument line shows just the rhythm you have to play. The pitch change you do, the color change you do is up to you, unless you have only the information, the articulation and the dynamics and the time frame of what's going on. But on which instrument you will play, which kind of pitch change you will have, it's up to you. Above this, there is the voice line, where you see there are pitches, and he says the clef you use, it's your choice. Everybody will use a different clef. Even relative pitch will be changed. The only thing you do, you stay with the interval concept, how do you say, interval concept of what you see. Articulation is fixed, character, dynamic is fixed. You just fill it up with your own thing. That's a basic idea. This kind of notation pretty much he keeps in the whole piece. And if you want to go, I could describe the other parts, what's going on. The next part is B. We don't have this one. I will show you like this.
Ja, das ist in der Kiste.
Ich habe hier was.
Yeah, that's okay. The B parts are written like this, so that a tape is running. We will have somebody who will follow the tape and doing the dynamics for the tape. And this is for one player. This is player 5. What he has to do, he has to follow these boxes here. This means play. During play, play. This you can play. You don't need, but it's ad libitum. And here play. And he has very nice categories. He has Farbe, color, Rhythmus, and Melos. And he gives little signs. He says, Farbe, very good, good, very good, or rhythm, good or very good, or bad and very bad. Which means, in Kagel senses, which just relate to the music you hear on the tape in a way you copy it or you do the opposite. It's not a quality aspect, it's sort of in which direction you relate to the tape. I love these B parts because here the magic is, since you choose tapes any kind of your choice, it has to be exotic tapes, non-European music. We will maybe talk a little bit later about exotic. Exotic is a colonialistic word and a colonial expression of what happened the last 500 years. And in the 20th century, it became a new thinking about what it means exotic and what Kagel means about. And the tape you choose, they are just running here, and every player relates to this. This is about the B part. The C parts, I can make it short, are written like the first, what you see in A, but they are quite short. It's only 8 bars or 10 bars, and a very defined musical material which works as a small interlude or condensed tutti version or something. And then there is the E part.
Don't forget the D's.
What?
D.
Yeah, I will explain at the end. The E parts are, I love about E parts. Every player has written imitation from. That means, of course, the players know the tape which will appear. But they start with an imitation, what they think is on the tape. And later, in the later moment, the original music will appear. Sometimes it appears very loudly and goes down. Sometimes it sneaks in. Sometimes it goes in and out. So the player, we start something doing, and only the player know they are imitating a music which will come later, which is a nice concept for to work with these tapes and make the relation between live performance and recorded music, original recorded music, to make it more interesting. The D parts is just solo parts, which it's a solo concept. What we have seen also in the beginning, just voice.
Voice line and
instrumental line. Instrumental line, that's all. And for this you do solo. And all these parts, you will build up a whole structure with the only rule that A has to be played in its whole. And there are some fermatas, and you can start to put in other things. That's basically the whole technical aspect of how the score is written. Mm-hmm. But for me, and also what is the crucial point about this piece is when you first started and you sing and you think, okay, what's this? What does it mean? You have to sing and you have to collect 10 non-European instruments. Should be string, brass, percussion, anything. And suddenly you're doing things, non-European things. So what does it mean? The last time I did it in the YEMA, we had 2 Korean and 1 Taiwanese musician in the ensemble. And so what's this Exotica? Exotic is a word. Maybe you can say something about the history of what exotic.
In fact, the word is older than the
20th century.
20th century and the colonialistic period. And exotic means coming from the old world of Greek culture, out of the here and now.
Yeah,
here.
artworks from other countries.
Yeah, it's of course not in any case a negative word. Yeah. But as I mentioned already, Puccini in the art, it has lots of elements with characteristic grotesque and ironic elements. But of course, the outside elements were very interesting, very fascinating, and far away. Let us mention at least Paul Gauguin or anybody else. Yeah, big painter who was impressed so much from the outside that he changed his style so totally. Yeah, and
he went to live there.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, and in the music you could mention Claude Debussy, who was very impressed at the world exhibitions in Paris, and he integrated elements. I think in the afternoon we will discuss in our panel a bit more about this intercultural aspects of naivety, of professional intercultural attempts to integrate and this, but it's a very important topic, I think, for the whole festival here during this time. Coming back to your very interesting description here in the score, it's this element, the vocal element, which is very, very unusual. I have to underline. For you as a performer of instruments, that are 6 performers of instruments, they have to sing. Yeah, it's something unusual for everybody. I think you mentioned that you sang in the choir, but it's something else to imitate music from other cultures. And here are some important remarks. I would read one element. Blatant comedy should naturally be excluded, but a strong nasal or guttural intonation is preferable. Yeah? That's the small borderline between being very serious and being not so serious.
Yes. But he wanted absolutely that you don't use your proper voice.
Yeah.
You should sing, but you should not use your proper voice.
You
should try to have a different character to your vocal. So like using the non-familiar instruments, you should use a non-familiar voice to yours. Yeah. Which is very difficult.
Yeah.
Since it can become very quickly very ridiculous also, as you say. So you have to find that borderline between seriousness and between comedies. It's the task.
And at the end also there's something written by Kagel on this question of exotism here. The fact that Exotica will mainly be rendered by musicians whose skin coloring and gestures are quite opposite to those of non-European players is part of the basic idea of the piece. The exposure of the very relative nature of the concept exotism. And the last sentence is also very typical Kagelesque, I would say. A trivial imitation of exotic music could not damage the intention of this composition. Could not damage the intention of the composition, but would lead to a bad standard of interpretation. That's interesting, to find the right way. Of course, there is imitation, yes, and if you try to analyze the whole piece, you can find different layers of imitation, yeah, with more distance and less distance. That's interesting for you as a musician. You can't make half an hour the same accent. You are more engaged, exaggerated in a bit, and then it's a bit distantly. And of course, that's a part of the interpretation, I would say. You can go a bit deeper about the interpretation. You mentioned already the background of your musicians. That's interesting, of course. At the first performance with Kagel 72 in Munich, there was Michel Portal and Vinko Globokar with own experience, not from really other cultures, but from other fields of music. But Michel Portal was also a jazz musician, yes? And so own experience come. When I hear to the piece in the performance of 1998, I have the impression in some parts there is the association of free jazz already there for some moments, yeah, in the part of D, and then a few minutes later it's very calm and yeah, sometimes really sort of reflection, happiness, and so it's a very, very big space to integrate your own ideas. Could you describe this concept and this work, which is very, very long, a bit deeper? To say the truth, Kagel wrote that you need long time for this piece. It's a bit unusual to write it in the score, but in fact, one needs it. You can say something.
Yes, you need a long time since you have to get familiar to play with all these strange instruments. You have to get familiar to sing along by yourself. But I think the main issue of forming the piece, since you have this material collection, let's call it like that, of various parts of this this score, you know, the A parts, B parts, C parts, D parts, and you have to make a combination out of it. I don't need that. Is the responsibility of forming a piece which then functions in the evening, to build a structure which obeys to so to say to a theatrical or a musical kind of responsibility. You have to form a piece which can hold the tension and can have an appearance which is logical, or which makes sense at least. So that's I guess that's the point which needs quite a lot of time, since you not only have the urgency of taking a decision to take this and that and this and that and to make a collage. Kagel had several parts running next to each other. For instance, he had a multi kind of setup for his score. But yes, to form something which can hold as a construction when you bring it to an audience. So for him, I think that was probably the main issue that he asks for a long time for preparation. To get rid of all your kind of anxiety to sing and to play percussion instruments or to string instruments or wind instruments, whatever. And yes, and just to be extrovert and to be an interpreter with the material you have given from the score. But yes, the piece itself needs a form by the end. It needs a form which is persuasive as a concert or a theater perhaps.
What I think is when you have a score, I'm just thinking about in the last 30 years, what kind of scores we have which ask you for things you can't do in the first moment. I mean, that's a crucial point. Everybody of us is doing learning instrument very hard. We have competitions. We are thrown out in the first round. Then we go to an audition for a job. We are thrown out because we are not good enough. So, and suddenly you have a score. Well, the first page we say, okay, you have to sing. Of course we can sing, but please go to Oslo and perform on the international festival and survive the stage by singing and play instruments you can't play. So what does this mean? In the beginning, I was as a percussionist, I'm used to change my perspectives all the time, because percussion is an instrument which is completely new in Europe, and we are still in the beginning, and it's developing very fast, so I'm used to this. After a while, and this is what Kagel demands from the player, you start, because what you don't leave during the performance is, let's say, your profession as a musician. You come on stage and you are a musician. You are the same person who will play next evening a Beethoven sonata or perform a piece by Kurtak or by Luigi Nono, I don't know. It's the same person, you come on stage. And Kagel knew this. He said, okay, your artistic impact you bring on stage, and then you start doing things you are not trained to. But interesting-wise, you become a professional in this being not professional during the rehearsal process or during the time you spend with the instruments. Because he asks for 10 non-European instruments. So you start collecting stuff, and you can't treat the instrument properly, but suddenly you find your own way to treat it, and you become a addicted person in this kind and a passionate person in this kind, and suddenly you reach another level. And Kagel knew this, and the whole composition strengths of the material keeps you safe in this. And this I love. And this I love about good composition, when the material is so strong that it protects you also a little bit. It's so strong made that there is something behind the idea. It's not so much about us. We have to perform good, but the idea itself, it's good. I'm just thinking, I was a little bit reading the program on the festival here, what it would mean for other composers, for other concepts of bringing. I know that Johannes Kreidler is doing something really interesting on Saturday here. He goes to very extreme. He brings musicians out to, he just stops an evening and starts a talk show or a reading or lecturing or something. I mean, and so, because I think composers jump in and out of what will I write? What kind of material will I present to a musician? And I think Kagel was very far developed. He had incredible ideas about and to go in which direction. And it's never, wie heißt das, sich lustig machen oder
make fun of.
It's not, make fun oder despektierlich.
Yeah, despecting.
It's never despecting or he never makes fun of something. In the end, everything is quite strong. And there's maybe this.
Let's not forget that, as you mentioned, he has done that piece in the 70s, and I think that it was the first time in the 92s for this opening of the first German state opened these two museums in Bonn, when Bonn was still capital of the country. They opened that museum and the exhibition place, which was kind of a very prestigious. The state builds a museum and builds an exhibition place, and for the opening series, Kagel thought, yes, this is the right piece to play. Mm-hmm. So it was his decision to bring Exotica, which has nothing, but really nothing to do with Bundesrepublik Deutschland, with the Federal Republic of Germany, to bring that as the main musical contribution for opening. It's a huge museum actually in Bonn. And we played it in a row maybe 5 or 6 times, and all the celebrities, all the public, political important people were there. So it was for him a very important point to bring this kind of idea. And I think it was nothing about, making fun of or whatever, but also for him being an Argentinian, having been a professor at the German Musikhochschule in Western Germany at the time. Don't forget Ligeti, don't forget. We had many foreign high professors teaching in German universities. For him, that was a main issue also. What means multicultural? What means extra European or extra German in that?
And we don't have to forget that Kagel came himself from Argentina and has father or mother from Russia, and so this mixture of cultural experiences was in his mind, of course. Coming back to this point of the borderline between professional and not professional, I have to mention that in 1998, Isao Nakamura played here with his own experience as a percussionist, and he was now replaced, if I'm right, by Dietmar Wiesner, of course not a percussion player, but the flutist of the ensemble. That's the topic. There is no need that an instrumentalist with the same professionality in the same field should replace anybody else, but there is open space to integrate own characters. We could ask what the members of this ensemble from today are doing normally. Are they percussionists mostly, or coming from other fields?
They're actually percussionists
yeah.
also. And
so,
as Rainer mentioned before, for a percussionist it's very normal
yeah.
to play various kind of instrumental families.
Yeah.
And in the case of Rainer himself, without him the piece wouldn't have been reborn in '92, since he found he had a link to an instrumental collector
in Frankfurt,
who brought all these exotic instruments to us. We had some, but yes, probably some drums and some kind of percussive kind of exotical instruments, but that was it. So we didn't have a great stock of it.
But I would like to encourage other instrumentalists who are not percussionists to do the same as you did as a pianist. Yes. It's of course a very, very hard thing you mentioned before. It's unusual in the world of music.
It's unusual and it's scarce.
Yeah.
It's also scarce. You don't come across these kind of tasks frequently.
I remember one other piece, Black and White, of Heiner Goebbels. There are some sections, I think at least 2 sections, in which the whole ensemble has to play wind instrument, strings, and to sing also as a choir, which this choir should not be a church choir. It should sound a bit in another way. It's an extremely interesting piece, and there is a big influence, I think, of Kagel also to Manos Tsangaris, his former pupil. Yeah, of course. And you mentioned Johannes Kreidler. I think this impact of Kagel's, reflecting the borderline between professional and non-professional to create some creativity in this field is very, very fantastic and specific for this piece, for the historical, position of Exotica.
I think his position as a teacher in Cologne was denominated musical theater.
Yes.
Music theater. It was not composition.
Yeah.
So already by the form of the professorship, it was clear that his output is a different one.
Yeah. And also, I know Manos Tsangaris, there's now a tradition in Germany to create spaces in the field of performers, composers, not only the classical way of composition. That's something also important for the whole field of contemporary music today. But I would like to mention one other point, if I'm right. In the first performance, 1972, they used masks, as we could see with Kagel, and then later versions.
No, it's not true.
It's not true.
No. The story is what you see. The photo.
Yeah.
They made only for the LP, for the cover, this appears only in the.
Are you sure?
Yes. In the performance, they came on with black concert dress, and Kagel made this only. This is only for the recording, for the cover.
He was very young.
Yes.
And this one as well. This is Siegfried Palm, the famous cello player. Also for the. You are sure? Because I read something that I wasn't at 1972. I was at the concert.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is only they made in a cold January for Deutsche Grammophon. They had to go to the theater in Cologne, and there is a photo of all of them, and one is missing. And Kagel made a very funny statement. He said he's hiding behind me or something. So this was no, it's you find on this DVD we made in Ensemble Modern. There is one of the players. He explains this what happened there, and one of the young students said, how was this piece aufgenommen?
Recorded.
Received in the public and in '72, and he said, I have to be honest, it was terrible.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. The critics and the audience didn't like it. And there is something about the piece which is quite demanding in this kind of what to do with it, you know, what's going on the, what bloody hell is going on the stage. And for me, still this question is until now is the same. Sometimes I think, what are they doing here? What are we doing? But I have to say, once you look in the score, once you look in the material of composition, you very quickly can find out, no, there's so strong ideas behind it that you have to go on the piece, reread the piece every 5 years, yes. And you find the qualities. And for me, the piece has incredible qualities, but still, it's so beyond musical, practical music. Wie sagt man, praktizierende Musik? Yes, unsere normale Musik. It's beside the musical practice of most musicians.
I disagree, actually. If you play a Beethoven sonata, you have to also to be persuasive. You have to be sure of what you do, and you have to be sure how you do. And it's the same applies with a piece like that. As a first task, of course, you have to get familiar with the instruments and your voice, and the fact that you're dealing with copying or anticipating or imitating or being on the contrary to something which is not out of your world. But as a final step towards an audience, you have to be persuasive. You have the vision, you have the strength, and you have the need to persuade as much of an audience as you can. It's not a second different of playing Bach or Beethoven. It's the same task. Yeah,
it's good to hear from a fantastic
pianist.
Yeah, because that's
the for the fact. Yeah. So if one feels kind of doubtful about it, it's the fact that what Kagel asked for the preparational period. You have in the preparational period you need the time to get familiar, to warm up, and to feel free when it comes to stage.
No, he calculates on this that in the end, you have a full professional musician on the stage, performing completely 100% of his artistic impact. And that's the big thing about the piece. And suddenly there is where the change starts. That you're starting doing something else, what you're doing normally, but with the impact stays the same. So there is something happening.
Do you remember when we played it in Bonn? This is kind of an auditorium, at the time that was very fancy kind of architecture, full of marble and everything stone, and these steps, an audience which comes down. And we had walkouts every night. Walkouts with ladies who were even commenting, that's now by far too much. And
also men.
I think Kagel loved those. He loved that.
But to say the truth, time has changed, and also the performance has changed. I'm quite sure that there is a big difference between the first performance, coming back to this topic. Yeah. If you compare it, the sections of imitations are now reduced. I don't know exactly why, but they are in fact reduced. In the second version of Kagel, in collaboration with you, he reduced this. My theory is that he recognized that it was a bit a problem of this piece, this dimension of so much imitation, ironic imitation. I think that's a problem. He never spoke about this. It's clear. It's typical for a composer like that. But
we do play his last version. We do play the version we last built with him.
Yeah.
But there is no need of doing so.
Yeah.
If we could take a decision, now we have another 3 or 4 weeks of working on the Exotica, I'm sure we would find another construction.
I only compare the version of 1972 with your first version. There it's in fact. Yes, that's a point. Coming back to the point why the reactions were so bad in 1972. The circumstances were rather good for the piece. It was the Olympic Games with lots of cultural interests and exposition in Munich. Also on this topic of culture in the world, and so one could expect something more positive, but in fact the reactions were extremely negative, and this was one reason the piece was not performed for a long time.
Also, our societies were still quite nationalized. Well, nowadays we have very cosmopolitan nationalities.
That's
in Norway,
that's another point. That's another point.
It's very mixed.
Yeah, that's another point, and that's probably a point of the freshness we can see after the concert tomorrow evening. My opinion is so. For me, it's the astonishing big difference between your version 1992 and 1998 compared with the older one. That's the point. Now you can explain a bit what you are doing together with 6 percussionists from Oslo. What are you doing? Of course, in every case, one should look for good instruments, which are unusual enough, and you are looking also for recorded music. What's going on? In 1972, Mauricio Kagel could take all famous instruments of a museum in Munich, the best quality, the highest quality, which is possible. And you, as Uli already mentioned, Rainer Römer had the opportunity in Frankfurt years ago to have a collection of non-European instruments. And what are you going to do now and during the last days?
Ask the students.
Ask the students, yes. We had a nice Tuesday this week. We came here and, okay, we found out we have to look for something. And I said, how far is your school away from here? And they said, yeah, we go 2 stations down. And they said, let's go. And then we went there and we started walking through the Hochschule, opening doors here, doors there, and we find things. It's interesting because it's a beautiful Hochschule and they have a good department for everything. And suddenly you find things. And even the ambassador of Thailand left something here. So we have some anklungs. And so I think what I want to say is today it's not such a problem to get a Nepal flute.
There's a shop around the corner here.
That's the first thing we did. Yeah, that's the first thing we did. We went to the station and started looking. Because you can always trust the score. He asks for 10 non-European instruments. So you start walking around and you find things. That's actually possible today. In times of internet, you just go to Alibaba and order what you want. And but still there is a demand to finding a thing. But then the next thing is starting the score. And what we will do after a break, we will start 11:15 or so. We will start from scratch, pretty much still from the scratch, doing some things with the students. We will go through the different parts, not in an order. We will show every part, and we will practice this stuff with the students. And who is interested will see what is it about and so. And so that's what we did on Tuesday. You just you start finding the stuff you need.
So you have to be very pragmatic. If you find an instrument, please take it. Yeah, because you don't have another chance to make a big choice between. But compared with the situation years ago with Kagel, we
had a luxury situation.
It's a story goes like this. There's a music dealer in Frankfurt. When I came to Frankfurt in '85 or '86, sometimes I needed something, and I found a music dealer. He was a very nice old man, and after a while, he found out I come from this ensemble which seems to do strange music and modern music. And sometimes I ask for, what is Drehler? Yeah? What is Drehler? Yeah.
Medieval kind of.
Yeah. So sometimes I step by and ask for strange things, and I said, do you have old cymbals or things like this? So, and after 3 years or so, one day I came in and he said, Mr. Römer, and he put out a folder and put it on the table and opened it, and there were photos of an incredible collection of instruments from all over the world. And then he closed it again and put it under the shelf. And I said, wow, that's interesting, what's that? And he said, yeah, it's my private collection. And then a year later, I said, actually, we are doing a piece where I need this kind of instrument. And then he again opened it, and he showed me, and I said, yeah, that's interesting. Where are they? He said, around the corner. And then a month later, he took me up to an apartment around the house, and there was a beautiful, big apartment. Everybody wants to have this now, this Altbau, what we call it in Germany. And it was full with the stuff he collected from over there. It was quite colonialistic collection. I thought, where has these things from? I don't know. And then he said, okay, you can have this. And we sort of, he rented us the instrument, and we were lucky. After a while, after another 7 years, I asked him, can we buy this? And we were allowed slowly to buy. And now we have a quite good collection of this. So this was lucky. Today, it's different. You go to the internet, you go to the neighbor, everybody has something, I don't know. You find things easily.
My last point in this first part, it's a question of dedication. There is written, dem sechsten Sinn, to the sixth sense. What is the sixth sense? What is your opinion about this? Do you have, as a musician, a sixth sense? Or
How are the 5 collected?
Everybody knows here. Yeah, it's something at the borderline fantasy or so on, in the borderline which creates this piece at some points between professional and non-professional, and between normality and non-normality and so on, and instrument. It's far away from too much pragmatism.
One rehearsal, when we rehearsed with him and we started to sing, he always said, use words, use syllables, use text, produce a text with the word. That means you start to impact, give what you sing becomes a sort of a meaning which you don't know about, but somehow something is happening with the audience, because we automatically start to fill it up with some meaning, whatever it means. Maybe it's the sixth sin, this kind of, you do something and we even don't know exactly what it means, but
yeah,
it's there.
Of course, it's a context of Sprach- und Lautkomposition of this period. Yeah, Kagel wrote a piece like Anagramma, for example. Legative wrote Aventure, and this specific attempts to create a new language is, of course, one element of this. In his text about this Exotica, Kagel mentioned you can take a language and from the end, you read it from the end to the beginning, and so yeah, if you don't have enough fantasy to create yourself a known language, it's a possibility. And that was a question with what you are doing. You can explain later in the second part. But these are some points of creativity which are really the main topic of this thing. To avoid to be too near to all cliches, the cliches of exotism, but also the cliches of the typical classical music in the whole Europe. That's a point.
Probably also about the definition of music. At that time was a different one than it would be nowadays. At that time, a noise or a syllable or a consonant or a scratch or a bang, a very unattended bang on a percussive instrument was difficult to be accepted as a musical event.
Yeah.
So definition of music such as, or sound world such as, was much more narrow than it is nowadays. I guess we have much now a complete different influence from various sides of musical life to come to yes, we have to listen to a part of music, to a piece of music, or we have listened to something. I think that is very inherent also in this kind of creation. If you think about Acostica, about the piece where he uses only debris from the storage of under the roof, all the rotten kitchen materials and so forth, and he starts just throwing them around on stage, but it functions at the end as a piece, as a musical piece. So the definition of what is music, I think, is very important for the use of instruments, for the singing, and as Rainer says, for creating a language, for creating syllables which don't make any sense. At the same time, he is in demand that you tell a story, that you pretend telling something. So I think the readiness nowadays, in our times, has grown towards that.
And let me mention that Kagel was in the 50s and 60s a fan of James Joyce, for example, in this creating language with sound and with meaning in the borderline and the difference. So we are coming to fields which are really far away from being only ironic and grotesque and with humor, with very serious. And of course, to conclude, this is a piece which gives more questions than answers. That's the typical for Kagel. That's a good point to end at the moment.
He